why do you think it was such a sharp sell-off? Was it market structure and too overcrowded in one name? Or was
everybody
it fundamentals?
focused on the same story, and people notice the falls more than the rises. Okay, they found it natural that the story would work, that Nvidia would keep rising, and unnatural when it pulls back a little bit. It pulled back, very little considering the risks involved in such an industry. You're building everything on the hope that people will use your chip, will use chips, rely on chips, and that the investment will not come from software or someone figuring out a better idea or some other method, and which is what happened. It's a hint of what is to come.
So the Nvidia moment of reckoning, it keeps on going. The internet is still going crazy. Social media, everyone is still talking about Nvidia, DeepSync, what the DeepSync moment might be for the AI industry or the US stock market. As I said on Monday, and this video is just meant to be a bit of a follow-up to the flash update. I don't think we know enough yet. For instance, 2 examples. They claimed the total cost to develop and launch this DeepSync platform was just around 6 million. Now we're starting to read headlines that 6 million is just an estimate, and they get to that number by basically trying to estimate the rental cost based on a number of GPUs used in the process for an X amount of time, which essentially is another way to say we don't know how they did it, we don't know what type of hardware they used, and we don't know how much time the development actually took. So we can only estimate based on these or that. So it could be that in a week, in a month, or in 3 months, we find out that it wasn't 6 million, but maybe it was 20, maybe it was 100, who knows? So again, a lot of rumors, a lot of speculations, a lot of numbers, and I don't really think we know for sure yet, okay? But what it's interesting for now, it's having a look at Nvidia itself as for the stock. And as you can see, after the gap down and the drop, it tried to put together a bounce. From a technical standpoint, you might say, yeah, it broke the momentum. It broke this ideal trend line. Previous support was broken. We traded back down to the lower one, and now we are trying to see if we can retest the previous area of support and either reclaiming it or confirming it as resistance. Now, again, the US markets are currently closed, so I mean, even if we switch to extended trading hours, well, it's basically it's the same picture. It doesn't really change a lot. I think at the end of the day, a lot of panic will be cooled down a notch over the next few days. Again, it doesn't mean that Nvidia will make new highs this week or this month. It just means that maybe you won't see another 15, 18, 20% crash right away, right? I'm still thinking the market is just trying to reassess what's going on and to either confirm and deny all the news, all the numbers, all the statements and the claims, all right? So I don't think we are in a position where we can absolutely assess if Nvidia it's doomed or if nothing changes on the other side of the spectrum, or maybe we just need to reevaluate the entire value or net worth or price of the stock in order to get to a much more fair evaluation or evaluation which is much more is much closer to fair value. I guess that's the story there for now.
So this is the beginning.
The beginning of what?
Beginning of an adjustment of people to reality, because now they realize now it's no longer flawless. You have a small little chip on the glass. Now they realize, oh, it's not infallible. Oh, maybe I should revise. Let me repeat a story I often talk about. If you were in 1999, 98, 99, trying to invest in the future of the internet, you would have invested in Alta Vista. And then Google came out of nowhere and displaced Alta Vista.
But I mean, it gets even deeper than that because everyone, if you read the headlines, it was all about the bubble is popped. I mean, is it? I was a bit on the provoking side. It was a little bit of a troll, a little bit of a joke, but you know the drill, right? Is it? The bubble really popped? I don't know. I got a few reservations on it, and I don't think that everything which came out it's definitely and absolutely bad for not only the AI industry in the US, but broadly speaking or generally speaking for the US stock market. All right. So it might be worth to try to expand a little bit the thought process here and look at things in their entirety instead of just focusing on one single piece of news or one single stock, right?
Does it show the fragility of market structure? Too
It
much
shows the
concentration right now.
fragility of the wealth formation based on a very small number of stocks causing it. Okay. And how much of wealth formation came from Nvidia? 3 trillion capitalization. A lot of it is recent. Okay, so it shows us how much the whole economic structure is fragile because of that.
So I get the problem and the potential concerns for the concentration of the current equity market. But again, at the same time, we have seen the breadth of the market actually improving with this dump of Nvidia. And it wasn't just Nvidia, of course, it was all the semiconductors industry. Like it was Nvidia, it was Broadcom, and it was AMD to some degree, right? So, I mean, the entirety of the industry was hit by this news, at least again, the knee-jerk reaction. Then the long-term implications are a whole different talk, and we will need to assess it as we progress. But no matter what you think about the potential concentration risk, at the end of the day, if you check other sectors, you notice something which is particularly interesting. Now, for instance, what a lot of people are actually scratching their head over is why the energy sector was hit. Because if you check companies like, for instance, Constellation Energy Corp or what was the other, Vistra Corporation, to some degree, maybe even ExxonMobil, but I do think Exxon was already going down a bit, but was due to other reasons. I mean, it's not because of DeepSeek. It was more tied to oil and what's going on in the oil market as a whole. But anyway, it was surprising for some folks to see the energy sector hit. But again, I mean, it's just linked to the entire AI narrative and industry because the premise was if we build AI, we need a lot of energy to fuel it. Now, if you disrupt that idea that it's gonna be so energy power hungry and energy consuming, the knee-jerk reaction will be, oh, well, so we don't need all of that energy. So again, those eventual potential and future earnings and revenues for the energy producers might be not there if now we discover we don't need that much of energy to fuel AI. So again, you see the energy sector taking the hit, and we'll see if it can recover. But if you then look at the market, I mean, yeah, it was a very sharp drop, no doubt. But if you look at it now, I mean, it doesn't really seem like a crash. We had days like this before, like in here, in here, in here, in here. I'm just looking at the Nasdaq now, right? Or in here, okay? But pretty much for all the rest of the spectrum, if you consider even some days that the Dow had, or the Russell, or the S&P as a whole, I mean, we got these sharp pullbacks, and at the end of the day, they end up being buying opportunities. So if you start to enlarge your viewing angle, you then realize that at the end of it, if you check, that's if you look at the Nasdaq E-mini futures, that's where they dropped, and we are almost there. If you check ES mini futures, they are right around there where the week opened up. And if you check the Dow, it's actually above it. So again, just because one sector of the economy or the entire stock market might be hit by something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to bring down everything else to the collapse. And we'll see what happens when we approach this area, or even just right now. I mean, I said, if you remember, I just said, don't do anything today. And it was on Monday. Just let the market clearing out the air. Because even if you believe this is substantial and it's going to have massive implications and impacts down the road, it's hard for the market to keep on crashing without at least a bounce attempt. So if you do think what came out of China is massively bearish for the stock market as a whole, this might be your opportunity to de-risk, to trim down positions. If, otherwise you think this is a buying opportunity, well, you got it. Okay. It all depends on your disposition, but we always get back to the same premise. Markets don't move in a straight line. And it looks like at the end of it, they're not really moving a lot overall. Yeah, sure, they got a very sharp and volatile move. The VIX spiked and whatnot, a lot of panic throughout one single day, but you can't just bring it all down to just one single day market if you're looking at it from even a medium term perspective. Okay. And then you look, you might think that the semiconductor sector in the US was massively overvalued and overpriced, and now they need to reprice down those valuations. And considering that something like Nvidia is a good chunk of the index, you start to think, well, if that goes down, we might see the index being brought down as well. But it is also true that if you check other companies, like, if you check Meta, if you check Google, if you check Apple, they're holding up relatively well. I mean, they might have had a little bit of a drop that very day, but if you look at them now, they don't look that bad at the end of it. And why is that? Well, look, these industries like Amazon, Meta, Google, they throw a lot of money to these semiconductor companies like Nvidia, Broadcom, maybe AMD, but the big story was Nvidia, of course. So the fact that now Nvidia has a competitor, maybe not, we'll see, or at least there is the perception Nvidia has a competitor, right? But how does it impact the potential future revenues and profits of Meta, Google, Amazon, and whatnot? You could also argue that despite the fact they invested a lot in these AI infrastructure, building data centers and whatnot, if now all of a sudden they have access to another form of AI, which dramatically cuts down costs, what's going to happen to their revenues? They can still use AI for the same goals they were using it before, but now they can cut the costs of the usage. That should project their revenues up and up and up and up. Therefore, the stock should reflect a higher price to earnings ratio at that point, because you cut the costs, what remains is the revenues, and they're actually increasing. So that would justify even higher valuations. And I know it sounds crazy, but look, I didn't invent it. I didn't invent it. So, that's just how the rationality of markets sometimes work. And to some degree, it could also be justified from a fundamental standpoint. So if you look at it with these lenses, what came out of China could actually be massively bullish for the index as a whole. I mean, talking about the S&P now, not necessarily the Nasdaq. Would you agree on saying that we could see the Nasdaq underperforming the overall S&P? Maybe. I mean, it's still a possibility. I've been particularly vocal in saying that I usually prefer to see the Nasdaq leading the charge to the upside. But hey, who am I to say that can change from one day or 1 month to the other? It can always change, right? We don't live in a constant state. Everything is always ever changing and evolving. So who knows? You got to be open to that possibility, right? So I guess, at the end of it, I was just trying to, again, put out a bit of clarifications for what happened and what it could happen going ahead. I think when you start to look at things from two different perspectives and you try to bring in information from many different angles, you do realize that headlines are just headlines. Then you need to dig and you need to see if there are other scenarios on the table, and especially what the market it's pricing in, it's reacting at, how it is reacting, how it is responding. So the price action then needs to be put in comparison with the potential shift and changes in the fundamentals. So again, it's some sort of a puzzle that you need to solve, and it's constantly evolving. So again, if you think that just because Nvidia could see a little bit of a further drop, a further readjustment in the valuation and prices as for the stocks, and same it could be for Broadcom or some others, but on the other hand, you see, let's say, the rest of the Mag 7, as I said, Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla, Amazon, which could actually see benefits from what happened, then you need to assess that it might be true that Nvidia makes up for 7% of the index, but these others, they're making up for, I guess, probably 20% on a market capitalization basis. So again, if they perform well and they have the fundamental reasons to perform well, overall the index should move to the upside. We get back to the same topics we were discussing at the end of 2025. Maybe you're not going to see another 20-25% plus returns year over year, but sure as hell, you shouldn't expect a 20% crash tomorrow just for what came out of China. So always keep your balance, always keep an open mind and assess things as they come. All right. We'll see what's going to happen. We are also going to see what's going to happen tonight, or I guess around the middle of the day for the US. It's FOMC day, guys. So now the attention will shift from DeepSync to Powell. We'll see what Powell says. Quite honestly, I'm not expecting a lot. I think it's going to be the same as usual. Data dependent. We are adjusting things as we see the data coming in. We maintain the usual stand of the dual mandate and yada, yada, yada. All stuff to say they are a reactionary agency and not a proactive agency. But that's just my take. We'll see what the press conference will bring. So I'll leave you off with that. And have a good session and have a good rest of the week. Be back for the weekly market recap at this point, unless something really big comes out over the next 2-3 days. Stay safe, be nice, and be cool. Niels out.
Mr. Hanna, you're able to do drugs during the day and still function, still do your job?
Well, how the fuck else would you do this job? Cocaine and hookers, my friend.